He knew that the person who needed to teach him some of his secrets would arrive with that caravan. The signs had foretold it. He did not yet know who that man was, but his trained eyes would recognize him the moment he set eyes on him. He hoped he would be someone with the same talent as his former disciple. He wondered, I don't know why these things must always be passed from mouth to ear. It was not that they were real secrets, for God freely reveals secrets to all his creation. He found only one explanation, that these things must be transmitted in this way because they are undoubtedly among the pure truths of life, and this kind of life is difficult to capture in images, let alone in words, because people become captivated by images and words and end up forgetting the language of the world. The new arrivals were brought immediately before the chiefs of the Fayum tribes. The boy could not believe his eyes. Instead of the single well surrounded by a few palm trees he had once read about in a history book, he found that the oasis was much larger, bigger even than some villages in Spain. It contained 300 wells, 50,000 palm trees, and a vast number of colorful tents scattered among the palms. The Englishman, eager to meet the alchemist as soon as possible, said, "It's as if we're living in 1,001 nights." Soon children crowded around them, staring curiously at the animals, the camels, and the newcomers. The men wanted to know whether they had seen any signs of dazzle, while the women argued over the fabrics and jewelry brought by the merchants. The stillness of the desert now seemed like a distant dream, as everyone spoke non-stop, laughing loudly and shouting at the top of their voices. It was as if one had left a world of pure spirits and suddenly found oneself among human beings. People were happy, truly happy, filled with contentment. In contrast to the strict precautions enforced the night before, the camel driver explained to the boy that an oasis is always considered neutral ground in the desert because most of its inhabitants are women and children. Some oases take sides with one tribe or another, but the warriors still go out to fight in the desert and leave the oases untouched, for they are considered forbidden places for them. The caravan leader gathered all his people, though he struggled to assemble them, and then began giving instructions. They would remain here until the war between the tribes ended. The members of the caravan would be taken in as guests in the tents of the oasis inhabitants, who would offer them the best accommodations, for that is the traditional rule of hospitality. Then he ordered everyone, including his personal guards, to hand their weapons over to the men chosen by the tribal chiefs. He explained, these are the rules of war, so that the oases do not become refuges for fighters. Annoyed, the Englishman took from his jacket a silver-handled revolver and handed it to the man collecting the weapons. The man asked him, "Why do you carry a gun?" He answered, "So it can help me stand up to others." He was pleased that he had finally reached the goal of his quest. The boy, for his part, thought of his treasure. The closer he drew to his dream, the more difficult things became. The beginner's luck that the old king had spoken of was gone. He knew now that this was a test of his resilience and his courage, a test of his personal legend. There was no room for impatience or haste, otherwise he risked missing the signs God placed along his path. He thought, astonished by his realization, that it was God who had placed the signs on his way. Until that moment, he had thought of signs as something belonging to the world, like eating, sleeping, or searching for love or work. He had never considered that they could be God's way of guiding him to what he must do. He repeated to himself, "Do not be impatient," and as the camel driver had said, Eat when it is time to eat, and walk when it is time to walk. On the first day, everyone surrendered to sleep from exhaustion, including the Englishman. The boy stayed far from him, sharing a tent with 5 other youths his own age, all of them children of the desert who wanted to hear stories about the great cities. The boy told them about his life as a shepherd. He had just begun telling them about his experience in the crystal shop when the Englishman entered and led him outside, saying, "I've been looking for you all morning. You must help me find where the alchemist lives." They tried searching on their own first, since surely the alchemist would live differently from the other inhabitants of the oasis, most likely under a tent with a furnace burning constantly. But after walking a long distance on foot, they realized the oasis was far larger than they had imagined, with hundreds upon hundreds of tents. The Englishman, sitting with him near one of the oasis' wells, said, "We've wasted almost an entire day. Perhaps we should ask someone." He did not want to announce his presence in the oasis and hesitated, but finally agreed and asked the boy, who spoke Arabic better, to take charge. The boy approached a woman who had come to fill her goatskin water bag and said politely, "Good evening, lady. I would like to know where the alchemist who lives in this oasis can be found." The woman said she had never heard of him and hurried away, but she had just enough time to warn the boy never to speak to women dressed in black, they were married, and that he should respect the customs. The boy felt deeply disappointed. Had he traveled all this way for nothing? His companion was sad as well, for the Englishman too was following his own personal legend, and when that is the case, the whole universe strives to help a person achieve what he seeks. That's what the old king had said, and he could not be mistaken. The boy told him, "Until recently, I had never even heard of the alchemist, but I'm trying to help you." Suddenly, a thought struck the Englishman, and he exclaimed, "Of course, it is very likely that no one here knows he is an alchemist. Ask instead about the man who heals all illnesses in the oasis." Several women in black came to draw water from the well, but the boy did not speak to any of them, despite the Englishman's insistence. Eventually, one of the men approached, and the boy asked, "Do you know if there is someone here who heals the sick?" The man replied, "God is the one who heals all illnesses," clearly annoyed by the 2 strangers. He added, "You both are looking for sorcerers," then recited some verses from the Quran and went on his way. Another older man appeared, carrying a small bucket. The boy asked him the same question, but the Arab asked in return, "Why do you want to know such a man?" "Because my friend has traveled on a long journey that took several months just to meet him," the boy answered. After a moment of reflection, the old man replied, "If this man lived here in the oasis, he would have great authority. Even the chiefs of the tribes would not see him whenever they wished. He would be the one to decide. Wait until the war ends, then leave with the caravan. Do not try to interfere in the life of the oasis." He spoke his final words as he walked away, but the Englishman felt happy. He believed he was on the right track. At that moment, a young woman appeared. She was not wearing black clothes. She carried a jug resting on her shoulder, and her head was covered, but her face was unveiled. The boy approached her to ask about the alchemist, and then time seemed to stop, as though the soul of the world had revealed itself in all its power before his eyes. When he saw her dark eyes and her lips that hovered between a smile and stillness, he recognized the deepest and most perfect part of the language spoken by the world, a language that every creature on earth can hear with its heart. Its name is love. Something deeper than human beings and deeper than the desert itself, yet always emerging with the same force whenever two gazes meet, just as theirs had met beside the well. Her lips finally chose to smile, and that was the sign he had waited all his life, the one he had searched for in books, among his sheep, in crystal, and in the silence of the desert. Here it was, the pure language of the world, requiring no explanation, for the universe needs no explanation to continue its path through infinite space. All he understood in that moment was that he stood before the woman of his life, and without any need for words, she too must have understood. He felt more certain of that than of anything else in his life, even though his parents and grandparents had always told him that a man must first get to know a girl, court her, ask for her hand, and that each must test the other after first ensuring he had enough money to marry. Surely whoever said that had never known the language of the world. For when a person absorbs that language, it becomes easy to understand that somewhere in the world, someone is always waiting for someone else, whether in the heart of the desert or in the middle of great cities. And when the two meet and their eyes connect, the past and the future lose all importance. Only the present moment remains, together with the unshakable certainty that everything under the sky has been written by the same single hand, the hand of destiny, which created a soul for every being, a soul that works, rests, and searches for treasure under the sun's light. For if this were not true, human dreams would have no meaning. He told himself, "It is written." The Englishman who had been sitting nearby got up and shook him, saying, "Go on, ask her." The boy addressed the girl, and she smiled again. He smiled too, asking her, "What is your name?" She lowered her eyes and replied, "My name is Fatima." "That is also the name of some women in the country I come from. It is the name of the prophet's daughter, peace be upon him, and our soldiers brought it there," he said. The delicate girl spoke proudly about the soldiers. The Englishman beside him urged him again, so the boy asked her whether she knew anything about the man who healed all illnesses. The girl said, "He is a man who knows the secrets of the world and speaks with the jinn of the desert. The jinn are creatures of good and creatures of evil." She gestured with her hand toward the south where that mysterious figure lived. Then she carried her jug and left. The Englishman went off again searching for the alchemist, while the boy remained sitting beside the well for a long time, realizing that the eastern wind had once brushed his face with this woman's scent, and that he had loved her even before knowing she existed. And the love he felt for her would help him discover all the secrets of the world. He returned the next day to the well to wait for her, and was surprised to find the Englishman, who for the first time was contemplating the desert. "I waited all afternoon and all evening. I told him what I was searching for. He asked whether I had already turned lead into gold. I told him that was exactly what I wanted to learn. He said I should try. He added nothing else, only go and try." The boy remained silent. The Englishman had traveled all that distance only to hear what he already knew. Then he remembered that he himself had given sheep to the old king for the same answer. He said to the Englishman, "Well, that is the secret." The moment he spoke, Fatima arrived at the well to fill her jug. The boy told her, "I came to tell you something very simple. I want you to become my wife. I love you." The girl let the water spill from the jug as he continued, I will wait here every day. I crossed the desert to search for a treasure near the pyramids, and war fell upon me like a curse, but now I see it as a blessing because it keeps me close to you. This war will surely end one day, he said. He looked at the palm trees of the oasis. He had been a shepherd and he had owned many sheep. Surely Fatima was more important than any treasure. The girl, as if reading his thoughts, said, "Warriors search for their treasures, and women of the desert are proud of their warriors." Then she filled her jug again and left. The boy continued to go every day to the well to wait for Fatima. He told her about his life as a shepherd, about meeting the old king, and about his work in the crystal shop. They became close friends. Except for the 15 minutes he spent with her each day, the rest of the day felt unbearably long. After nearly a month in the oasis, the caravan leader gathered all his followers and said, "We do not know when the war will end. We cannot resume our journey. The fighting will surely continue for a long time, perhaps for years. On both sides, there are warriors full of courage and determination. This is not a war between good and evil. It is a war between two forces struggling for the same power. When a battle of this kind breaks out, it lasts a long time because heaven supports both sides." The crowd dispersed. That evening, the boy saw Fatima and told her what had been said in the meeting. She said, "In our second meeting, you told me about your love. Then you taught me beautiful things, the language of the world, the soul of the world. All that made me, little by little, a part of you." He listened to her voice. It was to him more beautiful than the whisper of the wind among the palm fronds. "For a long time I've been coming to this well to wait for you. Now I cannot remember the past, nor the traditions, nor the way desert men expect women to behave. Since childhood, I've dreamed that the desert would one day bring me the greatest gift of my life, and it has. That gift is you." He wanted to take her hand, but she held tightly to her jug and continued, "You told me about your dreams, the old king, the treasure, and the omens, and so I fear nothing, because those omens brought me to you. I am part of your dream and your personal legend, as you always say, and for that same reason, I want you to continue your journey toward what you came here seeking. If you must wait until the end of the war, that is very good. But if you must leave before that, then go toward your legend. The dunes shift with the wind, but the desert remains the desert. That is how our love will be. It is written, if I am part of your legend, you will return to me." He felt sadness when he left her. He thought about many shepherds he had known who married and then struggled to convince their wives of their need to wander the pastures, for love requires being close to the beloved. The next day, he spoke with Fatima about these things. She said, "The desert takes our men and does not return them every time. We must accept that. Afterward, they live in the clouds that pass overhead, in the animals that hide among the rocks, and in the generous water that springs from the earth. They become part of the soul of the world. And some men return, and when they do, happiness overwhelms all the women, for the men they await may one day return. In the past, I used to watch those women and rejoice at their happiness. Now, I will be one of them, a woman with a man to wait for. I am a desert woman, and I am proud of that. I want my man to move freely like the winds that shape the dunes. I want him to live in the clouds, the animals, and the waters." The boy went to look for the Englishman to tell him about Fatima. He was surprised to find the Englishman had built a small furnace beside his tent, a strange furnace with a glass flask placed on top. The Englishman was feeding the fire with wood, staring into the desert. His eyes shone more brightly than they ever had while he was buried in his books. He said, "This is the first stage of the work. I must isolate the pure sulfur, and to reach that, I must not fear failure. My fear of failure is what has held me back until now from attempting to accomplish the great work. And here I am, beginning what I could have started at least 10 years ago. But I am happy that I did not wait another 20 years. He continued feeding the fire as he contemplated the desert, and the boy remained for a moment until the desert became tinted with a pink color in the moonlight. At that moment, he felt an overwhelming desire to set off into the desert to see whether silence could answer his questions. He walked aimlessly for some time without losing sight of the oasis palms. He listened to the wind and felt the gravel beneath his feet, and sometimes he stumbled upon a seashell and realized that this desert had once, long ago, been a vast sea. He sat upon a large stone and surrendered to the temptation of the horizon before him. He had never been able to imagine love without mixing it with possession. But Fatima was a desert woman, and if anything could help him understand, it was surely the desert. He remained like that, thinking of nothing, until a moment came when he felt something move above his head. When he lifted his eyes to the sky, he saw 2 falcons flying at a great height. He watched the 2 birds of prey and the pattern they formed as they flew. What seemed to be twisting lines in the air must have meant something, though he simply could not decipher it. He decided to follow the movements of the 2 birds with his eyes, hoping he could read some kind of message. Maybe the desert could teach him about love without possession. He felt a touch of drowsiness, but his heart asked him not to sleep, only to relax. He said to himself, "Here I am, slipping into the depths of the language of the world, and everything in those depths has meaning, even the flight of 2 falcons in the sky." He felt great gratitude for the love he held for the woman. When you love, everything gains greater meaning. Suddenly, one of the falcons dove to attack the other, and at that exact moment, the boy was struck by a sudden and brief vision, an armed troop invading the oasis with swords drawn. The vision quickly vanished, but only after it had been strongly imprinted in his mind. He had heard of mirages and had seen some before, desires taking shape on the desert sands, but he certainly did not wish to see an army seizing the oasis. He wanted to forget it all and return to his contemplation. He tried to refocus on the pink-hued desert and the stones, but a voice in his heart refused to leave him in peace. A feeling came to him that the vision was about to become reality. He barely managed to overcome his anxiety, then rose and walked toward the palms. Once again, he realized the multiplicity of meanings in things. Now, the desert had become safety, while the oasis had become danger. The camel driver was sitting against the trunk of a palm tree, watching the sunset. He saw the boy approaching from behind one of the dunes and said as soon as he neared him, "There is an army approaching. I saw it in a vision." "The desert fills men's hearts with visions," the boy replied, then told them about the 2 falcons he had followed in flight and how suddenly he had penetrated the soul of the world.
The camel driver did not reply, though he understood. He knew that anything on the face of the earth could reveal the story of all things. When a person opens a book at any random page, or reads someone's palm, or sees the flight of birds, or plays cards, he can discover something related to what is about to happen. But people only discover these things when they observe the world in a way that lets them penetrate the soul of the world. And the desert is full of people who earn their living because they can easily reach the soul of the world. They are known as seers, feared by women and elders, and consulted by warriors only rarely, for no one goes to battle if he knows the moment he will die. Warriors prefer to meet battle facing the unknown. But the camel driver was not a warrior. He had consulted many seers before, some of whom told him true things while others told lies. Then one day he asked the eldest and most revered among them why he cared so much about knowing the future. The camel driver replied, "So that I can do certain things and avoid others I do not wish to happen." The seer answered, "In that case, this will not be your future, but perhaps you want to know the future to brace yourself for what is destined to happen. If good things await, you will receive a natural, pleasant surprise. If bad things await, you will suffer greatly before they even happen."
The camel driver then replied, "I want to know the future because I am human and because people live dependent on their future." The seer remained silent for a moment. His specialty was the magic sticks he would cast on the ground and interpret based on how they fell, but that day he did not use his sticks. Instead, he wrapped them in a cloth, placed them in his pocket, and said, "I earn my living by reading the future for people. I know the art of the sticks and how to use them to penetrate the veils in which everything is written. I can read in them the past, discover what is appropriate, and understand the signs of the present. But when people consult me, I do not read the future, I only guess it. For the future is in God's hands alone, and He reveals His secret only to Himself and under specific circumstances. How then do I guess the future? Through the signs of the present. For within the present lies the secret. If you pay attention to the present, you can improve it. And if you improve the present, what follows will also be better. Forget the future. Live each day of your life according to what God's law commands, trusting in His mercy toward His creation. Every day carries eternity within it." The camel driver wanted to know the specific circumstances under which God permits the future to be seen. The seer replied, "When God Himself reveals it, and He reveals it only rarely, and for one reason alone, when the future He wrote must be changed." The camel driver thought that God had revealed the boy's future because His will had decreed that the boy should be His instrument. He said to him, "Go and meet the chiefs of the tribes and tell them about the coming warriors." "They will mock me," the boy said. "They are desert men, and desert men know signs. If they must know something, God's will ensures that someone brings it to them. This has happened many times before, but today you are the messenger." The boy thought of Fatima and decided to go meet the tribal chiefs. He said to the guard at the entrance of the large white tent erected in the center of the oasis, "I carry a message from the desert, and I wish to speak to the chiefs." The guard did not reply, but disappeared into the tent. He remained there for a long while, then emerged accompanied by a young Arab wearing a white and gold robe. The boy told him what he had seen, and the young man asked him to wait a moment and returned to the tent. Night fell. Arabs and merchants were entering and leaving in large numbers.
Gradually, the tents extinguished their lights, and soon the oasis became as silent as the desert. All that time, the boy could not stop thinking of Fatima. He still had not understood the conversation they had had earlier that afternoon. Finally, after several hours of waiting, the guard allowed him to enter. What he saw stunned him. He had never imagined that such a tent could exist in the heart of the desert. The ground was covered with the most beautiful carpets he had ever stepped on. Gilded chandeliers inlaid with jewels hung from above, holding lit candles. The 8 chiefs sat in the depths of the tent in a half circle, leaning on their elbows and stretching their legs over cushions of exquisitely embroidered silk. Servants moved back and forth carrying trays of food, pouring tea and tending the embers of the hookahs. The air was filled with the sweet fragrance of tobacco. The 8 chiefs were present, but the boy instantly recognized the most important of them, an Arab dressed in white and gold robe, seated at the center with the same young man from earlier beside him. One of the chiefs asked as he looked at the boy, "Who is this foreigner who speaks of a message?" "It is I," the boy replied, and then told them what he had seen. Another chief asked, "Why would the desert reveal such things to someone who has come from far away, while we have been here for generations?"
"Because my eyes are not yet accustomed to the desert," he said. "They can still see things that familiar eyes no longer see." He thought to himself, "And because I also know what the soul of the world is." But he added nothing, knowing the Arabs did not believe in such things. A third chief said, "The oasis is neutral ground. No one attacks an oasis." "I am only telling you what I saw. If you do not wish to believe it, then do nothing." Silence fell over the tent, followed by tense murmurs as the chiefs consulted one another in a dialect the boy did not understand. When he moved slightly as if preparing to leave, the guard signaled to him to stay. A sense of fear crept over him. The signs told him something was going wrong. He regretted speaking to the camel driver about the matter. Suddenly, the old man seated in the center smiled, just barely. He joined the discussion. He had not spoken a single word until then, but the boy had learned the language of the world well enough to feel a wave of peace flow through the tent. He did well to come, he felt him say. The discussion ended, and everyone fell silent to listen to the sheik. The sheik turned toward the boy, his face now cold and stern. He said, 2,000 years ago, in a distant land, a boy who believed in dreams was thrown into a well. He was found and sold as a slave. Traders like ours brought him to Egypt. We know that all who believe in dreams also know how to interpret them, even if they cannot always fulfill them. The boy thought of the old gypsy woman. That man saved Egypt from famine thanks to Pharaoh's dream about the fat cows and the lean ones. His name was Joseph. He, like you, was a foreigner in a foreign land, and he was probably your age. Silence fell again, and the sheik's gaze remained cold. He continued, "We follow our traditions. They teach us how Egypt was once saved from famine by Pharaoh's dream of 7 fat cows and 7 lean ones, and that its people became the richest on earth. Tradition teaches us how men should cross the desert, how they should marry their daughters, and tradition tells us that the oasis is sacred ground, for each of the 2 warring camps has an oasis that is exposed to danger." No one spoke as the old man continued.
But tradition also tells us to believe the messages of the desert. Everything we know, the desert has taught us. The sheikh gestured with his hand. All the Arabs rose, the hookahs were extinguished, and everyone stood upright. As the boy prepared to leave, the sheikh resumed speaking. But weapons must never be drawn except to be used in battle. They have moods, just like the desert. If we draw them needlessly, they may refuse to fire later. And if none are used tomorrow, at least one will be used, and it will be used against you.
When he stepped outside, the only thing lighting the desert was a full moon. He had a 20-minute walk ahead of him to reach his tent, so he went on his way. Everything he had experienced weighed heavily on him. He had plunged into the soul of the world for a moment, and the price he might pay for that could be his entire life. It was a great wager, but he had taken many risks ever since he sold his sheep to follow his personal legend. And as the camel driver had told him, dying tomorrow was no different from dying on any other day. Every day is created either for us to live it or to depart from life in it, and everything depends on one single word, maktub. It is written. He walked silently. He regretted nothing. If he had to die tomorrow, it would be because God's will was that the future must not change. But death would come only after he had crossed the strait, worked in the crystal shop, learned the desert, and seen Fatima's eyes. He had lived a full life every single day since he had left his homeland long ago. And if he had to die tomorrow, his eyes had already seen more than the eyes of other shepherds would ever see, and he was proud of that. Suddenly, he heard a roaring sound, and a violent gust of wind hurled him to the ground. A storm of sand swept over the place so fiercely that it nearly hid the moonlight. Before his eyes appeared a giant white horse neighing with a terrifying cry. He could barely understand what had happened, but when the dust cleared, he felt a fear unlike anything he had ever known. On the horse's back sat a man dressed entirely in black from head to toe, with a falcon perched on his left shoulder. He wore a turban and a face veil that revealed nothing but his eyes. He looked like one of the desert's messengers, but his presence resembled no one the boy had ever seen. The man pulled from his saddle a large curved sword that gleamed in the moonlight. "Who dares interpret the flight of the hawks?" the man thundered, his voice echoing as though the palms of the Fayoum oasis were repeating it. "I am the one who dared," said the boy. He remembered the statue of St. James crushing his enemies under the hooves of his horse, only now the situation was reversed. "I am the one who dared," he repeated, lowering his head, awaiting the sword stroke. Then he added, "You will save many lives because you failed to heed the soul of the world." But the sword did not fall swiftly. Instead, the warrior lowered it slowly until the blade touched the boy's forehead. The edge was so sharp it drew a drop of blood. The warrior remained completely motionless, and the boy remained still as well. The thought of running didn't even cross his mind. A strange sense of joy flooded the deepest part of his heart. He would die for his personal legend, for Fatima. The omens had been right. His enemy had arrived, and he should not be afraid of death, because the soul of the world existed, and soon he would become a part of it, just as the enemy would as well. But the enemy merely kept the tip of the sword pressed against his forehead.
Why did you read the hawk's flight?"
"I only read what the birds wanted to tell me. They want to save the oasis, and you and your companion will die if you attack, for the men of the oasis outnumber you."
The sword's tip stayed on his forehead. "And who are you to change a fate written by the will of God? God created armies just as he created birds, and God led me to what the hawks meant. Everything is written by his will," said the boy, recalling the camel driver's words. Finally, the warrior lifted his sword, and the boy breathed in relief, but he still could not run. "Beware of predictions. When things are destined, they cannot be avoided. All I saw was an army. I did not see how the battle ends." The warrior seemed satisfied with this answer, though he still held his sword unsheathed. He asked, "What is a stranger doing in a strange land?" "I seek my personal legend. This is something you cannot understand." The warrior sheathed his sword. The falcon on his shoulder let out a strange cry. The boy began to calm while the warrior continued with, "I had to test your courage. Courage is the greatest virtue spoken of by the soul of the world." The boy felt grateful. His heart widened. Few people earned such words. The warrior added, "A man must never falter, even when he has traveled a long distance. He must love the desert, but never give it all his trust. The desert is a test for all men. It examines every step they take and kills those who let themselves drift into distraction." His words reminded the boy of the old king. The warrior continued, "If the warriors come, and if your head remains on your shoulders tomorrow, come to see me at sunset." The same hand that had held the sword tightened on the reins, and the horse reared, lifting clouds of dust. The boy shouted as the warrior rode away, "Where do you live?" The hand holding the falcon pointed toward the south.
Thus the boy met the alchemist the following day. There were 1,000 armed men among the palm groves of the Fayoum, and before the sun reached its zenith, 500 warriors appeared on the horizon. The horsemen entered the oasis from the north. Outwardly, it seemed like a peaceful visit, but their weapons were hidden beneath white cloaks. When they reached the large tent erected at the center of the oasis, they drew their curved swords and rifles and attacked an empty tent. The men of the oasis surrounded the desert horsemen, and within half an hour, 499 bodies were scattered across the ground. The children remained at the far edge of the palm forest and saw nothing. The women prayed for their husbands beneath the tents and saw nothing either. Had it not been for the corpses lying everywhere, the oasis would have seemed to be living its life as usual. One warrior alone was spared, the leader of the raiders. In the evening, he was brought before the tribal chiefs, who asked him what had driven him to break tradition. He said his men had been suffering from hunger and thirst, and that, exhausted by the long days of war, they had decided to seize one of the oases so they could resume fighting.
The supreme tribal leader said that he felt sorrow for the warriors, but that traditions must be respected under all circumstances. The only thing that changes in the desert, he said, is the dunes when the wind moves them. He then sentenced the enemy leader to a disgraceful death. Instead of killing him with a blade or a rifle shot, he was hanged from the trunk of a dry palm tree, and his body swayed in the desert wind. The sheik of the tribe summoned the boy, gave him 50 pieces of gold, and asked him from that moment on to become an advisor to the tribe. When the sun had completely disappeared and the first stars appeared in the sky, though they did not shine brightly because of the full moon, the boy set off southward. There was only one tent there, and according to some Bedouins he encountered, the area was inhabited by jinn. Still, he sat there and waited for a long time. The alchemist appeared when the moon had risen high in the sky, carrying 2 dead hawks on his shoulders. The boy said, "Here I am. Was I supposed to be here, or did your personal legend will that I come all this way? There is war between the tribes, and it is impossible to cross the desert." The alchemist dismounted from his horse and gestured for the boy to enter the tent. It was similar to all the other tents the boy had seen in the oasis, except for the great main tent, whose wealth was legendary. The boy searched with his eyes for the alchemist's instruments and crucibles, but found no trace of them. There were only a few piles of books, a fire, and rugs decorated with mysterious symbols. "Sit down," said the alchemist. "I will prepare some tea, and we will roast these 2 hawks." The boy wondered if these were the same birds he had seen the day before, but he said nothing. The alchemist lit the fire, and soon the smell of delicious meat filled the tent, more enticing than the scent of the water pipe. "Why did you want to see me?" the boy asked. "Because of the signs. The desert winds told me you were coming and that you would need help." "Not me," said the alchemist. "The other foreigner, the Englishman, is the one who was looking for you. He must find other things before he meets me, but he is on the right path, for he has begun to contemplate the desert." "And I?" asked the boy. Repeating the words of the old king, the alchemist said, "When we truly want something, the entire universe conspires to help us achieve our dream." The boy understood then that here was yet another man he had met on his journey to guide him toward his personal legend. "So you will teach me?" "No, you already know everything you need to know. I will only put you on the path that leads you to your treasure." "There is war between the tribes." "I know the desert." "I have already found my treasure," said the boy. "I have a camel, the money I saved from the crystal shop, and 50 pieces of gold. I could become a rich man in my own country. But none of that is near the pyramids." "I have Fatima," said the boy. "She is a treasure greater than everything I have managed to acquire. She, too, is not near the pyramids." They ate the hawks in silence, and the alchemist opened a bottle and poured a red liquid into his guest's cup. It was wine, and of the finest the boy had ever tasted. When he drank, he began to feel at ease, though the alchemist frightened him a little. They sat outside the tent, filling themselves with the moonlight that dimmed the stars. Noticing the boy's growing delight, the alchemist said, "Drink, take your time and rest, as a warrior always rests before going into battle. But do not forget that your heart is where your treasure is, and that your treasure must be found so that everything you have learned will make sense. Tomorrow, sell your camel and buy a horse. Camels are treacherous. They can walk thousands of steps without showing any sign of fatigue, then suddenly kneel and die. Horses grow tired gradually, and you will learn the limits of what you can ask them and when they are about to die." The next evening, the boy arrived at the alchemist's tent on horseback and waited until the alchemist arrived as well, mounted on his own horse with a hawk perched on his left shoulder. "Show me life in the heart of the desert, for only those who can discover life in the desert can also discover treasures." They made their way through the sands, bathed in moonlight. The boy thought, "I do not know if I will succeed in discovering life in the heart of the desert. I do not yet know this desert." He wanted to turn back and say this to the alchemist, but he feared him. They reached the rocky area where he had seen the two hawks in the sky the day before. Now there was nothing but silence and wind. "I cannot discover life in the desert," said the boy. "I sense its presence, but I cannot lay my hands on it." "Life attracts life," replied the alchemist. The boy understood the meaning of his words and immediately let go of his horse's reins. The horse began to move freely among the rocks and sand. The alchemist followed him in silence while the boy's horse moved forward as it wished. After half an hour, the two men could no longer see the oasis. There was nothing left but the magnificent light of the sky and the rocks shining beneath it like silver. Suddenly, in a place the boy had never visited before, he felt his mare come to a halt. He said to the alchemist, "Here is where life exists. I do not yet know the language of the desert, but my horse knows the language of life." They dismounted. The alchemist said nothing. He simply began to observe the stones as he moved forward slowly. Then he stopped abruptly and bent down with extreme caution. There was a hole in the ground between the rocks. The alchemist thrust his hand into it, then pushed his entire arm in up to the shoulder. Something was moving deep inside, and the alchemist clenched his eyes, revealing the effort he was exerting. The boy could see nothing but the alchemist's eyes, and it seemed as though his arm was wrestling with whatever he had found in the depths of the hole.
With a sudden leap that startled the boy, the alchemist pulled his arm out and sprang to his feet. His hand was gripping a snake by the tail. The boy leapt back in fear. The snake writhed wildly, hissing and rasping, tearing at the silence of the desert. It was a cobra whose venom could kill a man in a matter of minutes. The boy thought, beware of the poison. The alchemist who had put his hand into the hole must surely have been bitten already, yet his face was perfectly calm. The boy remembered the Englishman saying that the alchemist was over 100 years old. He must know how to deal with desert snakes. He saw his companion mount his horse and draw a crescent-shaped sword. With it, he traced a circle on the ground, then placed the snake inside it. The snake immediately grew still. "Do not worry," said the alchemist. "It will not leave this circle, and you have discovered life in the desert. This was the sign I needed." Why was it so important? Because the pyramids are in the middle of the desert. The boy did not want to hear talk of the pyramids. His heart had been heavy and sad since the previous night, for seeking the treasure meant inevitably distancing himself from Fatima. "And now," said the alchemist, "I will lead you across the desert." "I will stay in the oasis," replied the boy. "I have met Fatima, and she is dearer to me than anything else." "Fatima is a desert woman," he said. "She knows that you must leave so that you may return. She has already found her treasure, you, and now she waits for you to find what you are searching for. If you decide to stay, you will become the advisor of the oasis. You will have enough gold to buy many sheep and camels. You will marry Fatima and live happily. In the first year, you will learn to love the desert, and you will know each of the 1,000 palm trees. You will understand how they grow, and you will see a world that never stops changing. Day after day, your interpretation of the signs will improve, for the desert is a teacher without equal. In the second year, you will remember that there was once a treasure, and the signs will begin to speak to you insistently while you try to ignore them. You will use what you have learned only for the benefit of the oasis and its people. The tribal leaders will be grateful to you, and your camels will bring you wealth and power. In the third year, the signs will continue speaking of your treasure and your personal legend. You will wander through the oasis night after night, and Fatima will become a disappointed woman because you stopped your quest for her sake. Yet you will still love her. She never asked you to stay, for a desert woman knows how to wait for her man to return. Night after night, you will walk the sands of the desert, remembering that you once could have continued your journey, trusting your love for Fatima more deeply. For what made you remain in the oasis was nothing but your own fear of not returning. When you reach that stage, the signs will tell you that your treasure has sunk forever into the depths of the earth.
In the 4th year, you will abandon the signs altogether because you refused to listen to them. The tribal leaders will understand this and remove you from your position as advisor. Then you will become a rich merchant, owner of many camels and much merchandise. But you will spend the rest of your days wandering among the palms and the desert, knowing that you failed to fulfill your personal legend and that time has passed you by. You will never understand that love never prevents a man from pursuing his personal legend. If it does, then it was never true love, the kind of love that speaks the language of the world. The alchemist erased the circle he had drawn in the sand, and the cobra fled swiftly, disappearing among the rocks. The boy remembered the crystal merchant who always wanted to go to Mecca, and the Englishmen who searched endlessly for an alchemist. He thought of a woman who trusted the desert, and one day the desert brought her the man she wished to love. He mounted his mare. This time it was the boy who followed the alchemist. The wind carried sounds from the oasis, and he tried to recognize Fatima's voice. She had not gone to the well that day because of the battle, but on that night, as he watched a snake inside a circle, the strange horseman with a hawk resting on his shoulder spoke of love, of treasures, of desert women, and of his personal legend. "I will go with you," said the boy, and immediately felt peace fill his heart. "We will leave tomorrow before sunrise," replied the alchemist. That was all he said. The boy could not sleep that night. Before dawn, he woke one of the young boys who slept with him in the same tent and asked him to show him where Fatima lived. They both went there, and in return he gave his guide enough money to buy a sheep. Then he asked him to find where the girl was sleeping, wake her, and tell her that he was waiting outside. The young Bedouin carried out the task, received enough money to buy another sheep, and said, "Now leave us alone." The boy returned to his tent to resume his sleep, proud that he had helped the advisor of the oasis and satisfied that he now had enough money to buy livestock. Fatima appeared at the entrance of the tent, and they walked together into the heart of the palm grove. He knew this went against tradition, but none of that mattered now. "I am leaving," he said, "and I want you to know that I will return. I love you because I love you. A person loves because he loves. There is no reason for love." Then he continued, "I love you because I dreamed a dream, then met a king, sold crystal, crossed the desert, saw tribes at war, and came close to a well to ask where the alchemist lived. I love you because the entire universe conspired to bring me to you." They embraced, and it was the first time their bodies touched. "I will return," the boy said again. "Before, when I looked at the desert, I felt longing. Now it will be hope instead. My father once left, but he returned to my mother, and he returns to her again each time." They said nothing after that. He walked a little through the palm grove, then escorted her back to the door of her tent. "I will return just as your father returned to your mother." He noticed that Fatima's eyes were filled with tears. "Are you crying?" he asked. "I am a desert woman," she replied, hiding her face, "but I am a woman before anything else." Fatima returned to her tent before sunrise. When day broke, she would go out to do what she had done for years, but everything would be different. The boy would no longer be in the oasis, and the oasis would no longer mean what it had meant only a short time earlier. It would no longer be the place of 1,000 palm trees and 300 wells, the Kaaba of travelers who arrived happy after a long journey. From that moment on, the oasis would be nothing but an empty place to her. From that moment, the desert would become more important than the oasis. She would spend her time watching the desert, wondering which stars were guiding the boy on his way to his treasure. She would send him her kisses on the wind, hoping they would touch his face and tell him that she was alive and waiting as a woman waits for a brave man who carves his path in pursuit of dreams and treasures. From that day on, the desert would be only one thing: hope for his return. As he began to plunge into the sands of the desert, the alchemist said, "Do not think about what you have left behind. Everything is recorded in the soul of the world, and it will remain there forever." The boy, who had once again grown accustomed to the silence of the desert, replied, "People dream more of returning than of leaving. If what you have found is pure matter, it will never decay, and you will be able to return to it one day. But if it was only a flash of light, like the blaze of a shooting star, you will find nothing when you return. Yet you will have seen a shooting star, and that alone is worth the hardships of life."
The man was speaking the language of alchemy, but his traveling companion understood that he was alluding to Fatima. It was difficult not to think about what he had left behind, for the desert, whose landscape scarcely ever changes, never ceased to fill him with dreams. Once again, the boy saw the palm grove, the wells, and the face of his beloved. He saw the Englishman in his laboratory and the camel driver who had been a teacher without knowing it. And the boy said to himself that perhaps the alchemist had never been in love. He walked ahead with a hawk perched on his shoulder. The hawk knew the language of the desert perfectly, and whenever they stopped, it would leave the alchemist's shoulder and fly off in search of food. It brought back a rabbit on the first day and a bird on the second. At night,
They spread their cloaks on the ground, but they did not light a fire. Desert nights were cold, and the darkness deepened as the moon waned in the sky. For a full week they advanced in silence, speaking only of the precautions that had become necessary to avoid getting caught in battles. The tribal war continued, and sometimes the wind carried the smell of blood. There must have been a fight nearby. The winds reminded the boy of the language of the signs, always ready to point out what the eyes could not see. On the 7th night of their journey, the alchemist decided to stop and rest earlier than usual. The hawk flew off in search of prey. The alchemist dug a hole in the ground and lit a fire inside it so that no one could see the flames. As he prepared their meal, he said, "You will soon reach the end of your journey. You have pursued your personal legend, and I congratulate you. But you have guided me without telling me anything. I thought you would learn what you already know." "Not long ago," he continued, "I met a man in the desert who owned books about the heavens, yet I learned nothing from him. There is only one way to learn, through action. Everything you needed to know, the journey has taught you. Only one thing remains." The boy wanted to know what that one thing was, but the alchemist kept watching the horizon, waiting for the hawk's return. "Why do they call you an alchemist?" the boy asked. "Because I am one." "And what is the problem with the other alchemists who searched for gold and failed?" "They were satisfied with searching for gold. They sought the treasure of their personal legend without wanting to live the legend itself." "So what is it that I still need to know?" the boy insisted, but the alchemist continued staring into the distance. After a while, the hawk returned with prey in its talons. The alchemist dug a hole in the ground and lit a fire inside it so that no one could see the flames. As he prepared their meal, he said, "I am an alchemist because I am an alchemist. I learned this science from my ancestors who learned it from theirs, and so on, since the beginning of the world. At that time, it was possible to write the entire great work on a small emerald tablet. But people failed to value simple things, and they began writing letters, commentaries, and philosophical studies. They also began pretending that they knew the path better than anyone else." "And what was written on the emerald tablet?" the boy asked. The alchemist began drawing in the sand. It took him no more than 5 minutes. As he worked, the boy remembered the old king and the marketplace where he had met him. It seemed like something that had happened many years ago. "This," said the alchemist, "is what was written on the emerald tablet." The boy drew closer and read the words traced in the sand. Then he said, feeling disappointed, "But this is a symbol that looks very much like what is written in the Englishman's books." "No," replied the alchemist, "it is like the flight of the hawks, something that cannot be understood by reason alone. The emerald tablet is a direct gateway to the soul of the world. The sages understood that this world is merely an image and a memory of paradise, and that the very existence of this world guarantees the existence of a more perfect one. God created this world so that people could, through visible and tangible things, understand His spiritual teachings and the wonders of His wisdom. That is what I call the great work. "So must I understand the emerald tablet?" the boy asked. "If you were in a laboratory, now would be the right moment to teach you the best way to understand it. But you are in the desert. It is better then to immerse yourself in the heart of the desert. It helps you understand the world just as anything else on the face of the earth does. In fact, you do not even need to understand the desert. It is enough to contemplate a single grain of sand, and you will discover in it all the wonders of creation." "And what should I do in order to immerse myself in the heart of the desert?" The alchemist said, "Listen to your heart. It knows everything because it comes from the soul of the world, and one day it will return to it." They continued their journey in silence for 2 days. Then the alchemist became excessively cautious, for they were approaching the most dangerous battle zones. The boy struggled to listen to his heart, but it was difficult to understand. Before, he had always been ready to leave. Now he wanted to arrive at any cost. At times, his heart filled him with longing, and at other moments it filled him with sorrow from the moment the sun rose over the desert, making the boy weep in secret. It beat faster when it spoke of the treasure, and it slowed when the boy's eyes wandered across the infinite desert. Yet it never stopped speaking, even when the boy and the alchemist exchanged not a single word.
That night, when they stopped, the boy asked, "Why must we listen to our hearts?" "Because where your heart is, there your treasure will be." "My heart is restless," said the boy. "It dreams, it worries, it loves a desert girl. It asks me questions and deprives me of sleep for nights when I think of her." "That is good," said the alchemist. "Your heart is alive, so keep listening to what it says." Over the next 3 days, they encountered many warriors and glimpsed others on the horizon. The boy's heart began speaking of fear. It told stories it had heard from the soul of the world, stories of men who went searching for their treasures and never found them. Sometimes it terrified him with the thought that he might never reach the treasure, or that he might die in the desert. At other times it told him that he had already found enough, since he had discovered love and earned a fair amount of gold. The boy said to the alchemist when they stopped to rest their horses, "My heart is a traitor. It does not want me to go on." "That is good," replied the alchemist. "It means your heart is innocent. It is natural to feel fear when we trade everything we have achieved for a dream." "Then why must I listen to my heart?" "Because you will never succeed in silencing it. Even if you pretend not to hear what it says, it will always be there in your chest, repeating what it thinks about life and the world, even if it betrays you. Betrayal is a blow you do not expect, but if you know your heart well, it will never take you by surprise, because you will know its dreams and desires, and you will know how to deal with it. No one can escape his heart.
That is why it is better to listen to what it says, so that you are never struck by a blow you did not expect. And so the boy continued listening to his heart as he made his way through the desert. He came to know its tricks and deceptions, and in the end he accepted it as it was. Then he stopped being afraid and stopped wanting to turn back, because one night his heart told him that it was happy, even when it complained of fear, for it was the heart of a man. The hearts of men are made this way, his heart said. They fear achieving their greatest dreams because they believe they do not deserve them or are incapable of attaining them. We, the hearts, die of fear that love might be lost forever, that moments that could have been wonderful might slip away, or that treasures that could have been discovered will remain buried in the sand. When such things happen, we suffer terribly until the end. One night, as they watched a sky from which the moon had vanished, the boy said to the alchemist, "My heart fears suffering." "Tell it," said the alchemist, "that the fear of suffering is worse than suffering itself, and that no heart has ever suffered when it has gone in search of its dreams, because every moment of searching is a moment of approach. When I was searching for my treasure, every day was magnificent, because I knew that each hour was part of the dream of finding it. And while searching for my treasure, I discovered things along the way that I would never have dreamed of encountering had I not had the courage to attempt things impossible to cowards." After that, his heart remained at peace throughout the afternoon, and that night he slept calmly. When he awoke, his heart began telling him things about the soul of the world. It told him that every happy person is someone in whose heart God dwells, and that a person can find happiness in a simple grain of desert sand, because that grain is a moment of creation that the universe spent millions and millions of years producing. His heart told him that every person on earth has a treasure waiting for him, and we hearts rarely speak of it anymore because people have stopped wanting to find those treasures. We speak now only to small children, and then we let life guide each person toward his destiny. Unfortunately, few men follow the path prepared for them, the path of the personal legend and the path of happiness. Most see the world as a dangerous place, and for that very reason, the world becomes dangerous indeed. Then we hearts begin to speak more and more softly, but we never fall silent. We only hope that our words will pass unheard, for we do not want people to suffer because they fail to follow the path we showed them. Why don't hearts tell people that they must pursue their dreams? The boy asked. Because hearts suffer more than anyone when that does not happen, his heart replied, and hearts do not like to suffer. From that day on, the boy kept listening to his heart. He asked it never to abandon him, to pound in his chest whenever he strayed from his dreams, and to give him warning signs. He swore that he would be attentive each time he heard those signs. That night he spoke of all these things with the alchemist, who understood that the boy's heart had returned to the soul of the world. "What must I do now?" the boy asked. "Continue walking toward the pyramids and keep paying attention to the signs. Your heart can now guide you to the treasure." "So that is the thing I did not know until now?" "No," said the alchemist. "What you still need to know is this. Before a dream is realized, the soul of the world tests everything that was learned along the way. It does not do this out of cruelty, but so that we understand at the moment of fulfillment itself the lessons we learned while pursuing the dream. This is the moment when most people give up on their dreams. We call it, in the language of the desert, dying of thirst, while the palm trees of the oasis are already visible on the horizon. Every quest begins with beginner's luck and ends with the test of the conqueror." The boy remembered a saying from his homeland: "The darkest hour is the one just before sunrise." The first tangible sign of danger appeared the next day. 3 fighters approached them and asked what they were doing in this place. The alchemist said, "I am hunting with my hawk." "We must search you to make sure you are not carrying weapons," said one of the warriors. The alchemist dismounted calmly, and the boy followed his example. When the warrior saw the boy's purse, he asked, "Why are you carrying all this money?" "To go to Egypt." The man searching the alchemist found a small crystal flask filled with liquid and a yellow glass egg slightly larger than a chicken's egg. "What is this?" he asked. "The philosopher's stone and the elixir of life. They are the great work of alchemists. Whoever drinks this liquid never grows old, and a small shard of this stone can turn any metal into gold." The 3 men burst into loud laughter, and the alchemist laughed with them. They found his reply extremely amusing and let them go without further harassment, leaving them with everything they had. After they had gone some distance, the boy asked, "Are you crazy? Why did you answer them like that?" "To show you one of the laws of the world, a law of great simplicity. When we possess great treasures within us, we are hardly aware of them. And do you know why? Because men do not believe in treasures."
They continued their journey through the desert, and as the days passed, the young man's heart grew increasingly quiet. It was no longer troubled by matters of the past or the future. He was content to contemplate the desert and to absorb, together with it, the soul of the world. He and his heart became intimate friends, incapable of betraying one another. When the heart spoke, it did so only to kindle the young man's courage and encourage him whenever the long days of silence appeared in a frightening form. For the first time, the heart began to speak to him of his great virtues, of the courage he had shown when he left his sheep behind and lived out his personal legend, of the enthusiasm he had demonstrated in the crystal shop. It also told him something else he had never noticed before. It spoke of the dangers he had escaped without ever being aware of them. Once, it reminded him of the loaded pistol he had stolen from his father, a weapon that could easily have wounded him. It reminded him of the day he had fallen ill in the open countryside, emptied his stomach, and then fell into a long sleep while nearby 2 thieves had planned to steal his sheep and kill him. But since the young shepherd never appeared, they eventually went away, believing he had changed his route. The young man asked the alchemist, "Do hearts always help people?" He replied, "They help only those who live their personal legend, but they also help children, madmen, and old men." Does that mean there is no danger? No, it only means that hearts do everything they can. One night, they passed near the camp of a tribe engaged in war. Everywhere there were Arabs wearing splendid white garments, their weapons ready at hand. The men were smoking their pipes and chatting, paying little attention to the 2 travelers. After they had gone some distance, the young man said, "There is no danger at all." The alchemist became angry. He said, "Trust your heart, but never forget that you are in the desert. When people are at war, the soul of the world also hears the cries of battle. No one is immune to what happens beneath the sky." The young man thought to himself, "All things are one single thing." As if to prove that the old man was right, 2 horsemen suddenly appeared behind them. One of them said, "You cannot go any farther. This is a region where battles are taking place." The alchemist looked directly into the warrior's eyes and said, "We will not go far." They were silent for a moment, then allowed the travelers to continue on their way. The young man watched the entire scene in amazement and said to the alchemist, "You subdued him with your gaze." The alchemist replied, "The eyes reveal the strength of the soul." The young man thought to himself that this was true, for he had noticed a man in the soldiers' camp staring fixedly at both him and the alchemist. Although the man was too far away for his features to be distinguished, the young man felt absolute certainty that he was being watched. Finally, as they were preparing to cross a mountain range that stretched across the entire horizon, the alchemist said, "We are 2 days' journey from the pyramids." The young man said, "If we must soon part, know this, alchemist, you now know everything you need to know. All that remains is for you to enter the soul of the world and discover the treasure that has been set aside for each of us." The alchemist replied, "That is not what I wish to learn.
I am speaking of turning lead into gold." The alchemist respected the silence of the desert and did not answer until they stopped to eat. He said, "Everything in the universe is evolving. Those who study alchemy know that gold is the most evolved of all metals. Do not ask me why, for I do not know. All I know is that what tradition teaches us is always true, but people have failed to interpret the words of the wise correctly. Instead of gold being a symbol of evolution, it became a spark for war. Things speak many languages. I have seen the cries of camels. At first they are only cries, then they become a warning of danger, and then they return to being mere cries. When the cries stop, it means the alchemist understands." The alchemist continued, "I have known true alchemists who secluded themselves in their laboratories and tried to evolve like gold. They discovered the philosopher's stone because they understood that when one thing evolves, everything around it evolves as well. Others discovered the stone by chance. These people possessed a gift. Their souls were more sensitive than those of others, but they are rare and do not count. There were others who sought only gold, and they never discovered the secret. They forgot that lead, copper, and iron also have their own personal legend to fulfill. Whoever interferes unjustly in the personal legends of others will never discover his own." The weight of the alchemist's words felt like a warning. He bent down and picked up a seashell from the desert sand. He said, "The sea once existed here. I noticed that earlier." The alchemist asked him to bring the shell to his ear. The young man had done this dozens of times as a child, and he heard the roar of the sea. The alchemist said, "The sea always lives inside this shell because that is its personal legend. It will never leave it until the waves once again cover this desert." He then mounted his horse. He said, "There is nothing new," and they rode on toward the pyramids of Egypt. The sun was setting when the young man's heart gave a signal of danger. They were surrounded by tall dunes. The young man looked at the alchemist, but he seemed to notice nothing. 5 minutes later, they saw 2 horsemen directly ahead. Before the young man could say anything to the alchemist, the 2 riders became 10, then 100, until they finally covered the dunes from end to end. They were warriors wearing blue garments, their turbans wrapped with 3 black bands. Their faces were covered with blue veils that revealed only their eyes. Even from that distance, their eyes revealed the strength of their spirits, and those eyes spoke of death. The men laughed.
They were accustomed to the violence of war and knew that the wind could not strike a fatal blow. And yet, each of them felt his heart tighten in his chest. They were desert Bedouins who feared sorcery. The leader said, "I would like to see something like that." The alchemist replied, "We need 3 days. Then he will turn himself into the wind, simply to show you the extent of his power. And if he fails, we will offer you our lives willingly in tribute to the honor of your tribe." "You cannot offer me what I already possess," said the chieftain with a kind of arrogance. Nevertheless, he agreed to grant the travelers a 3-day reprieve. The terrified young man could not take a single step. The alchemist had to grasp his arm to help him leave the tent, saying, "Do not show them your fear. These are brave men, and they despise cowards." The boy lost the ability to speak and did not find his voice again until some time later as they walked through the camp. There was no need to blindfold them. The Bedouins were content with confiscating their horses. And thus the world once again revealed its countless languages. The desert, which had been a free and boundless stage, had now become a barrier impossible to cross. The boy said, "I gave them all my treasure, everything I managed to earn throughout my entire life. And what good would it have done you if you had died? Your money bought you 3 days of life, and rarely does money succeed in postponing death." But terror had taken hold of the boy, leaving him no room to listen to wise words. He did not know how he could turn himself into the wind. He was not an alchemist. The alchemist asked one of the fighters for some tea and poured a little of it into the boy's cupped hands. A wave of calm spread through his body while the alchemist murmured words he could not understand. He said in a strangely gentle voice, "Be calm. Do not give yourself to despair, for that prevents you from conversing with your heart." "But I cannot turn myself into the wind." Anyone who lives his personal legend knows everything he needs to know. There is only one thing that can make a dream impossible: the fear of failure. I am not afraid of failure. It is simply that I do not know how to turn myself into the wind. Then you must learn. Your life depends on it. And if I cannot, then you will die having lived your personal legend, and that is far better than dying like millions of people who never even knew that a personal legend existed. But do not worry. Death generally makes people more attentive to life. The first day passed, and a great battle raged nearby.
Many wounded men were brought into the camp. The boy thought, "Nothing changes because of death. Those who fall are replaced by others, and life goes on." One of the warriors said before the body of a fallen companion, "You might have died later, my friend. You might have died after peace came, but in the end you were going to die anyway." Before nightfall, the boy went in search of the alchemist who had brought the falcon into the desert, and he repeated once more, "I do not know how to turn myself into the wind." Remember what I told you. The world is only the visible aspect of God's creation. Alchemy is nothing but bringing the perfection of the soul into the material world. What should I do now? Feed my falcon. And if I fail to turn myself into the wind, we will be killed. It is you who will die. As for me, I know how to turn myself into the wind. On the second day, the boy climbed to the top of a rock near the camp. The guards let him pass. They had heard of the sorcerer who could turn himself into the wind and did not wish to come near him. Besides, the desert itself was an impassable barrier. He spent the entire afternoon of that second day watching the desert. He listened to his heart, and the desert listened to the fear that lived within him. Both were speaking the same language. On the third day, the chief summoned his most important warriors to a gathering and said to the alchemist, "Let us go and see that boy who can turn himself into the wind." "Let us go," the alchemist replied. The boy led them to the place he had gone the day before, then asked everyone to sit down. He said to them, "This will take some time." The chief replied, "We are not in a hurry. We are Bedouins of the desert." The boy began to gaze at the horizon before him. In the distance there were mountains, dunes, rocks, and plants clinging to life, where the continuation of life seemed almost unimaginable. There was the desert he had traveled for months and months, and yet he had known only a tiny part of it. In that tiny part, he had come to know Englishmen, caravans, battles between tribes, and an oasis with palm trees and 50 wells. The desert asked him, "What do you want from me? Let us contemplate together long enough. You hold somewhere within you the woman I love. When I watch your endless sands, I see her as well. I want to return to her, and I need your help to turn myself into the wind and go back to her." "And what is love?" asked the desert. "Love is when a falcon flies over your sands because it sees you as your field of sustenance, and it never returns without prey."
He knows rocks, dunes, and mountains, and you are generous with him. The falcon's beak tears pieces from me, and that prey I have nourished for years and years. I give it drink from the little water I possess, and I guide it to the place where it can find food. Then one day the falcon dives from the sky at the very moment when I am about to feel that prey's embrace of the sands. The falcon takes what I struggled to make grow, but that was the purpose for which I fed and raised that prey, so that you might offer the falcon nourishment, and the falcon, in turn, offers nourishment to humankind, and from it the prey will be born again. That is the law of the world. And is this love? Yes, this is it. This is what makes prey turn into a falcon, the falcon into a human being, and the human being into the desert. This is what makes lead turn into gold, and what makes gold return to hide once more in the depths of the earth. The desert said, "I do not understand your words." Then understand at least this: somewhere among your sands there is a woman waiting for me, and in order to answer her call, I must turn myself into the wind. The desert remained silent for a few moments, then said, "I will give you my sands so that the wind may blow, but I alone can do nothing. Ask the wind for help." A light breeze arose. From afar, the war chiefs watched that young man speaking a language they did not know, and the alchemist smiled. The wind approached the boy and touched his face. It had heard his conversation with the desert, for winds usually know everything. They roam the world without having a land of birth or a land of death. The boy said to it, "Help me. One day I heard you carry the voice of my beloved. Who taught you to speak?" The desert speaks, and the wind speaks as well. The wind had many names. Here they called it Sirocco, and the Arabs believed it blew from a land rich in water, inhabited by black peoples. In the distant country from which he had come, they called it the East Wind, believing it carried desert sands and Moroccan war cries. And perhaps people elsewhere, far from the countryside where sheep graze, believe the wind comes from Andalusia. But the wind comes from nowhere and goes nowhere else. That is the secret of why it is stronger than the desert. One day, it may be possible to plant trees in the desert and turn it into pasture where sheep graze, but no one will ever succeed in subduing the wind. You will never be able to become the wind. My nature is different from yours. That is not true. I have learned the secrets of alchemy, and as I have traveled the world, I have discovered that within me live the wind, the desert, the seas, the stars,
and every creation in the universe. We were all made by the hand of the same power, and the same Spirit flows through us all. I want to become like you, to enter every place, to cross seas, to tear away the sands that hide my treasure, and to bring to my ears the voice of my beloved. I heard your conversation with the alchemist that day, when he said that everything has its personal legend. Human beings cannot turn into the wind. Teach me to become the wind for a few moments, so that we may speak together of the limitless powers of human beings. The wind knew many things. It had formed deserts, drowned fleets, destroyed entire forests, and wandered through cities filled with music. In short, it knew no boundaries. And now before it stood a boy who claimed that the wind could do still more. The boy sensed that the wind was about to yield to his request and said, "This is what they call love, when a being loves to become part of creation. When we love, we do not need to understand what is happening, because everything happens within us. Human beings can turn into the wind, provided the wind helps them, of course." The wind was very proud, and what the boy said disturbed it. It began to blow more violently, stirring up the sands of the desert. Yet it had to admit that even after traveling the entire world, it still did not know how to turn a man into the wind, and it did not know love. I have noticed during my journeys through the world that people speak of love while gazing at the sky, said the wind, angrily, because it was forced to admit its own limits. It is better, then, that you address your request to the sky. Then help me. Cover this place with dust so that I can look at the sun without being blinded. At that moment, the wind began to blow with tremendous force and veiled the face of the sky with sand. Nothing remained of the sun but a golden disk. It became impossible for the soldiers to distinguish anything. The Bedouins knew this wind well. They called it the simoom, and it was worse than storms at sea, though they did not know the sea. The horses neighed, and the sand began to cover the weapons. From atop the rock, one of the officers turned to his supreme commander and said, "Perhaps it would be wise to stop at this point." Indeed, it was now impossible for them to see the boy, and all faces were completely wrapped in veils. "By God Almighty, I want to see a man turn into the wind," said the leader. But he noted in his mind the names of those two fearful officers, for once the wind subsided, he would remove them from command. Bedouins of the desert have no right to fear. The boy addressed the sun, saying, "The wind
told me that you know love, and if you know love, then you also know the soul of the world, because love is its very substance." The son replied, "From my place I can see the soul of the world. It is connected to my soul, and together we work so that plants may grow, and we guide the sheep that search for shade. From my place, far away from the earth, I have learned how to love. I know that if I were to come even a little closer to the earth, everything would perish and the soul of the world would vanish. And so each of us takes care of the other. We exchange love. I give warmth and life, and the earth gives me a reason for existence." The boy repeated, "You know love, and I know the soul of the world, because we have shared long conversations about the extent of that endless journey around the world. It tells me that its greatest problem is that so far only minerals and plants have understood that all things are one, and although iron does not have to resemble copper, nor copper gold, each fulfills its role perfectly within that single thing. Everything would have become a symphony of harmony had the will of the hand that wrote all this chosen to stop on the 5th day, but there was a 6th day. You are wise because you see everything from afar, but you do not know love. For if there had not been a 6th day, humankind would not exist, and copper would have remained copper, and lead would have remained lead forever. Everything has its personal legend. This is true. But one day that legend fulfills its purpose, and then it must transform into something better, and there must be a new personal legend until the soul of the world truly and completely becomes one single unique thing." The sun remained thinking, and its radiance intensified. The wind, which was listening eagerly to the conversation, also began to blow more strongly, so that the sun's brightness would not blind the boy, who continued, "And for this reason, alchemy exists, so that every person may seek his treasure, find it, and then desire to become better than he was before in his life. Lead fulfills its role until the world no longer needs lead. Then it must turn into gold. Alchemists show us that when we strive to become better than we are, everything around us becomes better as well." The son asked him, "Why do you say that I do not know love?" "Because love does not mean remaining fixed like the desert, nor wandering around the world like the wind, nor seeing everything from afar like you. Love is the force that transforms the world and makes the soul of the world better. When I first merged with it, I thought it was perfect and without flaw, but later I saw that it is a reflection of all that has been created, and that it too has its wars and its passions.
We are the ones who nourish the soul of the world, and the earth we live upon will become better or worse depending on us, on what we become, whether better or worse. And here the power of love intervenes, because when we love, we always want to become better than we are. And what do you want from me? To help me turn myself into the wind. Nature knows that I am the most knowledgeable of all creatures, the sun replied, but I do not know how to turn you into the wind. Then to whom should I turn? The sun fell silent for a moment. If the wind were unleashed, it would spread across the entire world. The sun knew that its knowledge had limits, and yet it could not evade the boy who was speaking the language of the world. The sun said to him, "Turn to the hand that wrote everything." The wind let out a cry of satisfaction and blew with all its force. It tore out the tent pegs so that the tents flew into the air, and every animal was freed from its tether. On the rock, the men clung to one another so they would not be thrown down. The boy turned his heart toward the hand that wrote everything, and a wave of love overwhelmed him, and he began to pray. It was a prayer he had never known before, for it was a prayer without words. He asked for nothing. He offered thanks for having been able to find pasture for his flock. He did not ask to sell more crystal. He did not ask that the girl he had met should wait for his return. In the silence that followed, he understood that the desert, the wind, and the sun also were waiting for the signs written by the hand of power, and that they wished to follow their paths until they understood what was engraved on a simple emerald. He understood that those signs are scattered across the earth and through the heavens, and that they appear on the surface to be without reason or meaning. Neither the winds, nor the deserts, nor the suns, nor human beings understand why they were created. But the hand of power is the one that gives everything its reason, and it alone performs miracles, turning seas into deserts and human beings into winds, because it alone knows the plan that leads the world toward a purpose in which the 6 days of creation are transformed into the great work.
The boy immersed himself in the soul of the world, and he saw that the soul of the world was a flood flowing from the Spirit of God. When the boy realized this, he knew that he was capable of miracles. On that day, the simoom wind blew as it had never blown before, and the Bedouins would continue to tell the legend of the boy who turned into the wind and nearly crushed an entire camp, defying the authority of the greatest war chief the desert had ever known. The simoom wind ceased, and everyone turned their eyes toward the spot where the boy had been standing, but he was no longer there.
Instead, he was beside a guard whom the sand was nearly burying, watching the opposite side of the camp. Terror seized the men at that magic, but there were two men who were smiling. The alchemist, because he had found his true disciple, and the Bedouin leader, because the boy had humbled himself before the glory of God Almighty. The next day, the commander bade farewell to the boy and the alchemist, and assigned guards to accompany them to the direction they intended to go. They walked all day, and when night fell, the alchemist dismissed the guards. Nearby stood a monastery. The alchemist dismounted and said to the boy, "From here on you will go alone. Only a 3-hour journey separates you from the pyramids." "Thank you," the boy said. "You taught me the language of the world." "I did nothing more than remind you of what you already knew," replied the alchemist. The alchemist knocked on the door of the monastery. A monk dressed in black opened it. The alchemist spoke with him briefly, then ushered the boy inside, saying, "I asked him to allow me to use the kitchen for a moment." They entered the monastery kitchen. The alchemist lit a fire, and the monk brought some lead. The alchemist placed it in an iron vessel and waited as the lead melted. When it had liquefied, the alchemist took from his bag that strange yellow glass egg and scraped from it a fragment no thicker than a strand of hair. He wrapped it in wax and threw it into the vessel containing the molten lead. The mixture instantly took on a deep crimson color. Then the alchemist removed the vessel from the fire and let it cool. While waiting, the alchemist spoke to the monk about the tribal war. "It is a war that will take time," the monk said anxiously, for caravans had long been stranded in Giza awaiting the end of the fighting. After a while, the monk said, "But let the will of the Lord be done." "Yes," the alchemist replied, "let his will be done." When the mixture cooled, the monk and the boy looked at it in amazement. The metal had solidified at the bottom of the vessel, but it was no longer lead, it was gold. The boy asked, "Will I be able to learn someday to do something like this?" The alchemist replied, "That is my personal legend, not yours, but I wanted to prove to you that it is possible." They returned to the monastery door, and the alchemist divided the disc into 4 parts. He gave one part to the monk, saying, "This is for your generosity to strangers." The monk replied, "This thanks far exceeds my generosity." "Do not say that, for life may hear what you say and give you less another time." Then he approached the boy and said, "And this is for you. It compensates for the gold taken by the war leaders." The boy was about to say that it was far more than what he had lost, but he fell silent, remembering what the alchemist had said to the monk. The alchemist continued, "Let me tell you a story." The boy drew closer on his horse. There was once a man who was among the highest ranks of an empire and very close to the emperor. He had 2 sons. One of them became a soldier in the army and was sent to the farthest provinces of the empire. The other became a poet who enchanted Rome with the beauty of the verses he wrote. One night, the father had a dream in which an angel came to him and told him that the words of one of his sons would spread throughout the world and be repeated by all future generations. The man awoke weeping with joy because life had bestowed such generosity upon him, and because the vision filled the heart of any father with pride. Not long afterwards, the father died while trying to save the life of a child who was about to be crushed under the wheels of a carriage. Because he had lived a righteous and upright life, he went directly to heaven, where he met the angel who had come to him in the dream. The angel said to him, "You were a good man. You lived lovingly and faithfully. Today I can grant you any wish you desire." The old man replied, "Life was generous to me. When you came to me in the dream, I knew I had been rewarded for what I had done in life, for my son's poems would live in the memory of humankind for centuries to come. I ask nothing for myself, but every father takes pride in seeing the fame of the one he raised as a child and taught. I wish to see my son's words echo in the distant future."
The angel patted the old man on the shoulder, and they set off together toward the distant future. Before them appeared a vast square in which thousands of people were speaking a strange language. The old man's eyes welled up with tears of joy, and he said to the angel, "I knew that my son's motto was beautiful and immortal. Can you tell me which of his poems these people are reciting?" The angel then gently took his hand and sat with him on a bench in that wide square. He said, "Your poet's son's poems were very popular in Rome. People loved them and enjoyed them greatly, but after the era of Tiberius ended, they forgot them. The words these people are reciting belong to your other son, the soldier." The old man looked at the angel in astonishment, who continued, "Your son went into service in a distant province and became the commander of 100 men. He too was a righteous and upright man. One night, one of his servants fell ill and nearly died. At that moment, your son heard about a divine man who healed the sick. He spent consecutive days searching for him, and during his quest, he discovered that the man he was looking for was Christ. Before others, he healed people through his hands and began to find guidance. Although he was a Roman commander of 100, he changed his faith. One day, when he reached the presence of this divine man, he informed him that one of his servants was ill. The divine man said he was ready to accompany him to the servant's house, but the centurion was a man of faith. He looked closely into the man's eyes and realized that he truly stood before Christ. Then the angel finished speaking to the old man. And that is everything about your son's life which was never forgotten. O Master, you are not worthy to enter under my roof, but just say a word, and my servant will obey. The alchemist advanced slightly on his horse, speaking to the young man. Every person on the surface of the earth has a major role in the history of the world, though usually they do not realize it. The young man smiled, for he could never have imagined that life could assign such importance to a shepherd. The alchemist said goodbye, and the young man replied, "Goodbye." He continued traveling through the desert for about 2 hours, trying to listen carefully to what his heart was saying, for it would reveal precisely the place where his treasure was hidden. Had the alchemist not told him, "Your treasure will be where your heart is," his heart might have been speaking of other things. He proudly recounted the story of a shepherd who left his flock to pursue a dream, seeing it twice, and spoke about the personal legend and about all the men who did the same, those who journeyed in search of distant lands or beautiful women, and who faced the opinions of their contemporaries and their rigid judgments. Throughout that journey, his heart spoke of discoveries, books, and revolutions, and as he was preparing to climb a hill, his heart whispered in his ear, "Pay attention, for your treasure is here." Slowly, the moonlight illuminated the hill once again, and for a whole month the desert shone under the full moon. In its play with shadows, the desert took the appearance of a sea with blazing waves. The young man remembered that night when he had let his horse run freely and given the alchemist the sign he had requested. Finally, the moonlight enveloped the silence of the desert and that long journey that men take in search of treasures. Moments later, when he reached the top of the hill, his heart thumped in his chest, for there, in the light of the full moon, stood the great pyramids of Egypt, towering in the white desert before his eyes. He knelt and wept, praising God, for he had believed in his personal legend, and because one day he had met a king, then a merchant, then an Englishman, then an alchemist. And he praised him above all because he had met a woman of the desert who made him understand that love could never keep a man away from his personal legend. Over the centuries, the pyramids had gazed from their heights at what lay beneath their base, and even now, if he wished, he could return to the oasis, marry Fatima, and live as a simple shepherd. Yet Santiago lived in the desert. Even though he understood the language of the world, and even though he knew how to turn lead into gold, he did not need to demonstrate his knowledge or skill to anyone. He had learned everything he needed along his journey toward his personal legend whenever he needed to learn it, and he had lived whenever he dreamed of living. But he had reached his treasure. No work is complete until one reaches its ultimate goal, and here, atop this hill, he wept. He looked at the ground where his tears had fallen and saw a scarab beetle moving. During his wandering in the desert, he had learned that in Egypt the scarab is a sacred symbol. Here is another sign, he thought, and so he began to dig, remembering what the crystal merchant had told him. Even if a man spends his entire life collecting stones, he will never build a pyramid in his garden. He dug through the night at the exact spot, finding nothing. From above, the pyramids watched silently, yet he did not give up. He dug tirelessly, struggling against the wind, which more than once filled his hole with sand. His hands grew tired, his skin became raw and covered with wounds, but he continued to trust his heart, for it had told him to dig where his tears had fallen. Suddenly, while trying to dislodge some stones buried in the ground, he heard the sound of approaching footsteps. Some men came toward him, moving against the moonlight so he could not see their eyes or faces. One of the newcomers asked, "What are you doing here?" He did not answer, though he was afraid. Either he would now extract a treasure from the earth, or he would not. This is why he was scared. Another said, "We are refugees from the war. We need to know what you are hiding here. We need the money." The young man replied, "I am hiding nothing." But one of the men pulled him from the hole, while another searched him and found a piece of gold in one of his pockets. One of the attackers said, "He has gold." The moonlight illuminated the face of the man searching him, and Santiago saw death in his eyes. Another said, "He must be hiding more gold in the ground." They forced him to continue digging, and when they found nothing, they began to beat him. They struck him for a long time until the rays of the sun appeared. His clothes were torn, and he felt death approaching. What use is money if a man must die, he thought. Rarely does wealth save a man from death. These were the words of the alchemist. Finally, he said, "I am searching for a treasure." And despite the wounds to his swollen mouth from the blows, he told his attackers that he had dreamed twice of a buried treasure near the pyramids of Egypt. The man who appeared to be the leader of the gang remained silent for a long time, then addressed one of his followers. "Shall we leave him alone? He has nothing else with him, and he must have stolen this gold." The young man fell to the ground, his face in the sand. There were eyes searching for his eyes. It was the gang leader. But Santiago turned to look at the pyramids. The leader told his companions, "Let's go from here." Then he returned to the boy and said to him, "You will not die. You will live, and you will learn that a man must not be so foolish. About 2 years ago, right here, where you now lie, I dreamed a dream, and it repeated. I saw that I must go to Spain and search in the countryside for a ruined church. Shepherds often spend the night there with their flocks, and a tamarisk tree grows at the site of its altar. There I will find a buried treasure. But I am not foolish enough to cross the desert. I have seen the same dream twice." And with that, he left. The young man rose with effort and looked once again at the pyramids. The pyramids seemed to smile at him, and he smiled back, his heart filled with joy. At the sight of the altar, life thrived, and one could even see the stars through the half-ruined roof. He remembered that he had once come here with his flock and spent a quiet night except for a recurring dream that haunted him. Now he was here without the sheep, but he had a shovel with him. For a long while he contemplated the sky. Then he took from his pouch a bottle of wine and drank. He reflected on all the journey he had traveled and on the strange ways in which the universe had guided him to his treasure. Had he not believed in the recurring dreams, he would never have met the gypsy, nor the king, nor the thief. Yet the list went on, but the path had been clearly marked by signs, and he had no reason to err. He drifted into sleep without a hint of worry. When he awoke, the sun had long since risen. He began to dig beneath the tamarisk tree, saying to himself, "Old wizard, you knew everything, and even left me a little gold to help me return to this place." The monk laughed as Santiago's worn sandals appeared before him. "Couldn't you have spared me this?" The wind answered him, "No, if I had told you, you would not have seen the pyramids. Would you not agree that this is their wonder?" That was the voice of the alchemist. Santiago smiled and resumed digging. After half an hour, his shovel struck something solid. After an hour, he uncovered a chest brimming with old Spanish gold coins. There were also gemstones, scattered golden necklaces adorned with white and red feathers, and small stone statues inlaid with diamonds. These were the remnants of a caravan long forgotten by the lands and neglected by the invaders who had failed to tell their descendants about it. From his pouch he took the stones of Urim and Thummim. He had used these stones only once before in the marketplace one morning. Since then his life and journey had been full of signs. He placed Urim and Thummim inside the chest, for they were part of his treasure, holding the memory of that old king he had never met. He thought to himself that life truly is generous for those who pursue their personal legend. Then he remembered that he still had to go to Tarifa and give the 10th of everything to the gypsies. He wondered why he owed them, perhaps because they wandered so often. The wind began to blow. The east wind, coming from Africa, did not carry the scent of the desert, nor the threat of Moroccan invasion. Instead, it carried a fragrance he knew well. It caressed his lips with extreme tenderness, and he smiled. It was the first time it had done so. He said, "Here I am, Fatima. I am coming."